A pair of U.S. political stories headline today's edition of CNN 10, and they both concern the House of Representatives and President Donald Trump. I'm Carl Azus with a down-the-middle explanation of what's going on. First, Democratic leaders of the House have announced they'll bring 2 articles of impeachment, 2 formal charges against President Trump. Those charges are abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. They're related to a controversial phone call the American president had in July with the president of Ukraine. Democrats say President Trump abused his power by pressuring Ukraine to investigate the son of political rival Joe Biden, a former U.S. vice president who's running for the presidency in 2020. Democrats say President Trump obstructed Congress by not fully cooperating with the House impeachment investigation. There are questions about whether these 2 charges are impeachable offenses. Democrats generally say they are. Republicans generally say they aren't. The Constitution says a president can be removed from office if convicted of, quote, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Both President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have said nothing illegal took place on their phone call. And House Republicans say their chamber's investigation was unfair and biased against the U.S. president. But the stage is set for a vote next week on the House floor where a simple majority of lawmakers will determine whether there are sufficient grounds for impeachment. If the House, which is controlled by Democrats, votes that there are, a trial will be held in the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans. And analysts expect it will find the president not guilty and that he can remain in office. But all this is being watched very closely because neither of those votes has actually happened yet. Second political headline concerns the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. It would replace NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that took effect in 1994, but that President Trump has called the worst trade deal in American history. For most of his term, his administrations worked with Canada and Mexico on a new agreement, and the USMCA is the result. But it has to be approved by Congress first. And though House Democrats now say it's much better than NAFTA, they had some initial objections to the deal. Yesterday, Democratic leaders said they'll support it now that some revisions have been made. Observers say this will be a legislative success for President Trump if it passes in the House and Senate. 10-second trivia. More than 44% of the land in the United States is covered by what? Concrete, farmland, forests, or water? Agricultural land takes up about 44% of the land in America, followed by forests, which account for 33%. Some growers are promoting vertical and underground farms as relatively new ways to cultivate crops without taking up much space. This can happen in buildings, shipping containers, or tunnels, as you're about to see. There are some disadvantages to this. For one thing, they're expensive to get started. Even if you already have an abandoned building or tunnel to start with, you're going to need the technology. That can mean a lot of artificial light and energy use. For another, these farming methods might not work for all crops, and it could result in higher costs for what is grown. But when everything goes right...
Deep under the mountains of South Korea, with no natural sunlight, something is growing. It's a salad. This is the world's first commercial tunnel farm, constructed inside a disused highway tunnel, and Che Jae-bin is the person who created it.
일전에는 여기가 대한민국 최초의 고속도로로 쓰였던 터널이고
The tunnel's sharp curve caused several collisions, so they decided to carve out a new, more gently curved route right next door. The old tunnel, all 600 meters of it, is now being used to grow salads, leafy greens, even strawberries. And to encourage them to grow, classical music is being played throughout the tunnel. Che actually recommends Beethoven or Schubert.
인도화 팜의 가장 큰 장점은 일조량을 균일하게 할 수 있다는 게 가장 큰 장점입니다.
Using LED lights allows Che and his team to grow crops all year round. They're also what gives the farm its pink glow. They emit only the spectrum of light that plants use to photosynthesize.
일반적인 인도화 팜은 실내에서 모든 전기 에너지를 투입해서 이제 온습도 조건을 맞추는데 언더그라운드는 자체적으로 열교환을 일으키고 그 실외나 실내보다 일정한 온도를 유지하기 때문에
And that's what makes this farm uniquely successful. In fact, Che has plans to build many more farms using the same technology, but in suitable urban locations.
앞으로는 도시에서 멀리 떨어진 농장에서 생산을 해서 물류 이동을 하는 그런 체계가 이제 없어지리라고 봅니다. 집안에서도 가까운 스토어에서도 또는 지하철역에서도 그런 얼번팜 형태가 그 곳곳에 생기게 될 것으로 보입니다.
SLS and Artemis are two terms you'll need to know going into our next story. SLS is short for Space Launch System, a massive rocket that NASA hopes will return people to the moon. It's now assembled and ready for testing, but it's seen a lot of delays and cost increases along the way. Artemis is NASA's next moon program, and a space industry analyst says it's already had trouble getting the funding it needs to get off the ground.
It's taken 7 years to get here, over $14 billion. So Jim, tell us, why does NASA need SLS?
So the SLS rocket is the only rocket right now in the world that's going to be qualified to take humans all the way to the moon. Of course, we have other rockets that are qualified to fly humans, but there is nothing that takes humans all the way to the moon. And so when we do the Artemis program, which is a return to the moon sustainably, with commercial partners and international partners, where we're going to use the resources of the moon to learn how to live and work for long periods of time, and then we're going to take all of that knowledge onto Mars. This is the key capability that's going to enable all of that to happen.
All right, one thing that would be great to have some clarity on is the per launch cost of SLS.
So when we think about the cost of an SLS rocket per launch, it really, quite frankly, depends on how many we buy in a certain package. So if you buy one SLS rocket, it's going to be very expensive. I would say on the order of $1.6 billion. If we buy multiple SLS rockets, maybe as many as 10 or 12, it can get down under $1 billion, $800 million per copy. But look, these are all estimates at this point. NASA needs to sit down with its prime contractor, Boeing, to negotiate the best solution to getting the right mix of the number of rockets and the cost per rocket. But at this point, we're under contract to build 2. And of course, we want to go to the moon in 2024. We're going to need at least a third and maybe even more rockets after that.
Now, earlier this year, you told me that Artemis would cost in the range of $20 to $30 billion. Are you still on track for that?
I think that could prove to be a very accurate number. I will tell you, we are working through a budget request right now for 2021, and in that budget request, we will have the out years, which will show the entire cost of the Artemis program to land the first woman and the next man on the south pole of the moon by 2024. So yes, I think that's probably in the ballpark, but I'm not going to nail down any numbers until we negotiate the final solution on all of these different budget parameters.
And can you give us any further details about the lucky individuals who will be flying on this thing? We know that one of them will be a woman. Can you give us any more details on who that female might be?
Well, I'll tell you this. We do have a very diverse, highly qualified astronaut corps, and we've got a number of women that are perfectly capable of doing the job, and they are all very excited about the opportunity to be the first woman on the moon.
For 10 out of 10, here's an event where getting the axe is how you get the party started. This is the World Axe Throwing Championships. It was held recently in Arizona, attracting axe throwers from, yes, around the world. And before you laugh, the prize was $15,000 and the event was broadcast on ESPN. This is not something you should practice in your living room or probably anywhere outside a designated axe range. But if you're a lumberjacks who knows jacks and hacks about the exacting and some would say relaxing sport of axing, you wouldn't be slacksing or finding anything taxing about taxing a sort of board game that tests your mettle while you get a handle on busting the competition's chops. I'm Carl Azus, reporting just the facts on CNN10.